let's talk about the world map. That map you know so well? It's actually a pretty new thing. Today, we're diving into one of the most powerful and disruptive ideas in modern history, nationalism. We're going to see how it completely redrew the world between 1750 and 1900.
And it's a great question, right? Because it's so easy to just look at a map and think, well, that's just how it is. We take those borders completely for granted. But the truth is, for most of human history, the world looked nothing like the one we know today.
For thousands of years, the world was all about huge, multi-ethnic empires. I'm talking about the Romans, the Ottomans, the Mongols, these massive, sprawling territories where your loyalty wasn't to a nation or a country, it was to an emperor. The idea that a group of people with the same language and culture should have their own country, that would have sounded, well, completely bonkers to them.
So this is the story of how that once strange idea, nationalism, really grabbed hold of the world. And as we're about to see, it's a powerful and, well, a dangerous idea. It could build brand new nations and free people, but it also had this darker side, planting the seeds for some absolutely devastating conflicts down the road.
Okay, so what exactly did it take to set off this massive global change? Well, you can kind of think of it like a revolutionary recipe. You've got a few key ingredients that when you mix them all together create a total perfect storm.
And here they are, the three big ones. First, you've got this brand new super powerful idea of nationalism. Second, you have people being really unhappy with their rulers, which, let's be honest, is a pretty constant theme in history. And third, you add in a big helping of radical new thinking from the Enlightenment. That was the spark that lit the whole thing up.
And I mean, this was a truly revolutionary concept. For the very first time, people started to believe that, hey, if we have a shared culture, a shared language, a shared history, maybe we have the right to our own self-governing state. It's this core idea. The nation, that's the people, should have its own state, its own government, and its own borders. That link was brand new.
This is where the Enlightenment comes in, providing all the intellectual firepower. Thinkers from this period came up with a whole new way of talking about power, a language that directly challenged the old way of doing things. Ideas like popular sovereignty, the belief that power comes from the people, not from some king appointed by God, that was incredibly radical. It gave people a really powerful reason to demand a totally new world.
So, with that revolutionary recipe all mixed together, the Atlantic world just erupts. One revolution starts to inspire the next, and you get this incredible domino effect that's going to reshape entire continents.
Just look at this timeline. First the American Revolution, then the French, then the Haitian, and then a whole wave of them across Latin America. They all just exploded one after another. This wasn't a bunch of random, separate events. No way. This was an era of deep, connected, world-shaking change.
The American Revolution is, of course, a classic example of this. When Britain tried to slap new taxes on the colonies to pay for its wars, the colonists, full of these new Enlightenment ideas, fired right back. And this was never just about the money. It was a fight for their rights, for the core principle of governing themselves.
And then you have Haiti. Wow, this story is just absolutely remarkable, and honestly, it gets overlooked way too often. In what was France's richest colony, enslaved people heard all this revolutionary talk about liberty, and they said, okay, that applies to us too. They rose up, they beat Napoleon's army, one of the most powerful in the world, and they founded the first free black republic in history. You just can't overstate how significant that was.
And that revolutionary wave just kept going, heading south. In Latin America, you had the Creoles. These were locally born people with European roots. They had plenty of money, but they were shut out of any real political power. So when Napoleon invaded Spain and created this huge power vacuum, leaders like the famous Simón Bolívar grabbed their chance. They used those same Enlightenment ideals to light a fire of independence across the entire continent.
But here's the thing about nationalism. It wasn't just about blowing empires up. It had this other side, a second face. It could also act like a powerful glue, a force that could bring people together and build something new.
And this contrast is really the key to understanding it. So, on the one hand, nationalism could shatter a big, diverse empire into a bunch of smaller nations. But on the other hand, it could take a whole bunch of separate little states that shared a culture and forge them into one single unified country.
Germany is the perfect example of this unification. For hundreds of years, Germany wasn't really a country. It was just this messy collection of more than 30 separate states. But then you get leaders like Otto von Bismarck, who just masterfully tapped into this growing sense of a shared German identity. He used diplomacy and, as he so famously put it, blood and iron, yep, that means war, to hammer all those pieces together into one powerful new nation.
And this nationalist fire was spreading, fueling resistance to colonial rule all over the globe. You see it in the Philippines, where a new educated class started demanding reforms from Spain. You see it in Puerto Rico, where poets and activists like Lola Rodriguez de Tio used patriotic writing as a kind of cultural weapon, calling for their own independence. Nationalism was officially going global.
Now, if you want the ultimate example of nationalism as a dividing force, you got to look at the Balkans. The Ottoman Empire was getting weaker, and underneath it, you had all these different ethnic groups: Serbs, Greeks, Bulgarians, you name it. And each one started demanding its own independent state. It created this unbelievably tense and complicated situation that people started calling the powder keg of Europe.
The Ottomans, they could see the writing on the wall. They tried this last-ditch effort called Ottomanism. The idea was to create a new shared identity, to make everyone a loyal Ottoman first, before they were a Serb or a Greek. But it was just too little, too late. That nationalist desire for your own state was just way too powerful, and the empire just kept breaking apart.
So, what's the legacy of all this? What did this revolutionary era leave behind? Well, it's pretty clear that when all these powerful forces came together, they completely remade our world. And they left behind a really complex inheritance, one we're still trying to figure out today.
And this is really that two-sided legacy of nationalism we talked about. It was an incredible force for liberation, right? It created the world of independent nations that we live in. But it also had this really dark side. The clashing of all these national ambitions, especially in places like that Balkan powder keg, planted the seeds of a conflict that would eventually explode into World War I.
Which kind of leaves us with one last thought. When you look around the world today, when you see ongoing struggles for self-determination, or you hear those heated debates about what national identity even means, how do you see the echoes of this revolutionary era from over 200 years ago still shaping our world right now?